You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
Hello friends, welcome to episode 14 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run your best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I am Sarah.
And I'm Rob. We only have our standard Patreon update. It is still live, and we are still looking for show support. We appreciate our Patreon members. Every time we see another person add on, it makes us happy to know that there are people out there who are enjoying this as much as we are.
Absolutely. And we thank you all so much for your support. And we love seeing the orange names in Discord, honestly. Like all the great discussion that takes place on the Discord, your name becomes orange there, so everybody can see that you are a supporter of the show.
Yep.
And we love seeing those numbers grow. Thank you.
Yeah, and we understand for the people who aren't supporting us, it doesn't mean you're still helping us with the show. Every time you make a comment, every time you add a question, those things help us find definitions and things we can do because we can't think of everything.
Yep.
And we can't know what you guys want us to talk about. So we try and do it. And like today's show kind of came out of a lot of discussion that we had seen. And we kept setting it off because of how big it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is a daunting topic.
Yeah.
This is a really daunting
And we know
topic.
today's show is not the end of it. This is going to go on for some time.
Oh, yeah. Tip of the iceberg here, and we're going to deep dive little bits of it further as we go on. But today we're going to start this discussion about campaigns and writing them specifically.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to focus on the storyteller for the most part for our next couple of shows and kind of walk through what can be a seriously daunting task when you get an idea where something inspires you and you're like, yeah, I want to run a game, but I want to run a game that's not pre-content. That's not a book content. That's not a module that somebody else created. Like, how do I step into this?
Right.
How do I eat this elephant?
And you want all sorts of plot twists and stuff like that. Maybe you're an avid fan of Game of Thrones. I know this was like a real big thing for me as I saw the popularity of Game of Thrones was really something that actually kind of daunted me. I was like, I will never write like this. I mean, season 8 excluded. Season 8 excluded. But specifically, the George R. R. Martin, content, the Song of Fire and Ice, where I wanted all these, political intrigue and interactions and stuff like that. And I kind of had to step back from it and just go, hold on. First off, you're not George R. R. Martin.
No.
And second off, that book did not get written overnight, So
God, no.
Step back and just...
Yeah, let's be honest. There are books that haven't been finished.
Exactly. So the starting question that we want to open this discussion with is, how do you eat an elephant?
Well, with small bites.
One bite at a time.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. You can get through it. I've heard of a guy who ate a whole airplane. A whole airplane. He did it.
Is he okay?
Yeah. He's actually eaten other things. But his whole thing is small. You just take it small. But he wanted to be a guy who ate an airplane. I'm dead serious.
I have so many questions.
I know.
But not here.
I know.
Not here,
I know.
not now.
I know. Let's just talk about we won't talk about the passing. We're just going to talk about the eating part.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our listeners. This is now a show about eating airplanes because this is going to consume the next hour.
No. I'm sure there'll be some interesting Discord questions. We'll go from there.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, we're going to start small. We're going to start simple. We're going to start at the beginning, and not necessarily the beginning that we think of. Because inspiration comes from all kinds of places, and the reason why you're getting into writing a campaign or a story or wanting to write something can come from all kinds of angles. So we could talk about where you should start with theme or where you should start with this, and really that's inspiration. We're going to talk about the things that we want to focus on as far as what makes a good campaign? What are the small things that we've been doing for the last 20 years that we didn't recognize? And realistically, I started doing that over a month ago. I was kind of scared of this episode in a way.
Oh, because I'm still scared of this episode. And I'm sitting right here.
Yeah, it'd been a while since I had physically gone out and written stuff besides physical stories. I'd written some story things. I'd done NaNoWriMo a few times, and it's been a while since I've had to write things. And because of some personal stuff, I hadn't been running anything. And so looking at like not only getting back to running my campaign that I've got that is going to come back around, and getting into other games, I started going, oh crap, I got to get back to writing. And so I kind of started pulling back some of my old information and grabbed some books from a friend about writing and really started to dive and used this as a wedge in my mind of saying, okay, let's see what makes good story. Let's see what do we do that makes good story. And as I started tearing it apart, I was realizing how many of the little things that I kind of just take for granted that I do.
Yeah. Yeah, you brought some of those materials to me the other day when we were discussing, putting together the topic sheet and stuff like that. We're getting our notes down so that we can do the show today. And you showed me one or two of those videos, and one of them was like 17-minute long TED Talk and stuff like that.
It was fantastic.
One of them was this really great deep dive into this, like the Dan Harmon, story wheel thing. And it's like the whole steps of like every story goes through. It's like these 8-point things, and I'm like, this is complete BS. Like this doesn't help me. Like you're really super jazzed about this, and like I'm sitting here on the other end biting my tongue, going, I don't want to be the one to tell you this is completely useless to me. And
that was, by the way, that was her exact words after I was like, so did you watch it? And she's like, yeah, I have no idea what the hell you just sent me.
So, I mean, maybe you'll give me a different perspective on it. And we talked it out a little bit, and I realized the reason I was having that reaction to it was because it was all stuff that I took for granted.
Yeah.
And it was like once he started saying, okay, remember in your game when this happened? And I said, yeah, okay, that was the beginning of the journey.
Yeah.
Now remember what happened when the NPCs did this? And I was like, oh shoot, that was the plot hook, and then this is the next step, and this is the
turn.
Okay, yep. And then you guys had to fight this, but there was a plot twist because it wasn't what you thought initially.
And it was everything you did naturally.
Exactly.
And it's come from years of learning. And it's the whole like, I'm a swordsman, but I never learned from a master. So I look sloppy. I have all kinds of crazy methods for doing things. It's because I found these things function and work. But it's not because I had a scientific background or I went through an academy or anything like that. It's just the way I did things, and because they worked, I continued doing those things and perfecting them.
To quote Julia Roberts from The Mexican, somehow you have Forrest Gumped your way through this.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're going to break down some of the stuff that we do.
And we're going to try to save you guys all 25 years of failing upwards.
At least partially in this episode.
Right. And give you some shortcuts. So.
And at the same time, we're going to be interested to see what of this you pull out and what things are different in your mind.
Oh, yeah.
So after we're done with this, by all means, go into the Discord, talk about it.
Post-show Discord's always the best.
Please. Add some extra questions because, again, we're not done with this by any means.
Yeah.
So one of the things that came out of that TED Talk, and I thought it was probably the best way that it said, and I've read it before, and one of them said it perfectly, which was, life is stranger than fiction because fiction needs to make sense. If you don't have a plot or a narrative shape, then it won't be interesting. And I kind of was like, it's fiction. And then I went, yeah, that makes sense. Because when we tell our stories, we need to make sure that our players understand what's going on. And some of that just, it needs to have procedure. One of my players will constantly looks at me with this look of like, does this make sense? And I think about it like he's a judge that sits in my table, because I know if it doesn't make sense to him, I'm screwed. Right? And so I use that as a bar sometimes in my mind, is that the players have to understand what's going on in the story. The world has to make sense. The story has to make sense.
It can make sense in completely goofy ways.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can have floating mountains. That's fine.
Sure.
But just as long as you understand that floating mountains are a thing.
Yes.
Then it just has to be consistent. It's
correct.
Consistency, not accuracy that you're looking for.
Right. So when you're thinking about your story, no matter what the story is, no matter what inspires you, remember that it needs to make sense. In the end, if the core of everything you're doing in your story, your campaign, whatever, has a core point of, does this make sense to more than just you? You know, because you may have all of this history in your brain of what's going on really in the world. If it doesn't make sense to the players at the core level, it's going to be lost.
Yep.
It's not going to be interesting.
Now, I'm going to segue just briefly here.
Sure.
Are you familiar with a term in your line of business called rubber duck debugging?
Yes. For those of you who do not know this, when you're coding, you basically, at the end of your code, you have to figure out how it's running. And there's a lot of different methodologies for this, but the simplest one is the rubber duck method, and that is where you literally explain what your code is doing step by step to a rubber duck. And if you stumble during that process and cannot explain it, perhaps you should put the duck down and go back to your code.
Yep. And so I would say that probably the same thing kind of applies to your plot. Like if you can just give me a plot, like if you can summarize your plot to a rubber duck and saying it out loud, just to yourself and hearing yourself say it, and it still makes sense to you, then you're probably on the right track.
I would agree. Okay. Another thing that came up through our discussions was a very simple design. Now, people will go crazy with themes and directions and hooks and other things, but remember that your players themselves are going to be their own people. But they have to have one thing, and that is either the villain or the players need to have desire. Okay, there has to be that in there. And granted, sometimes it's as simple as your players are yearning to kill something. Like you take the bad guy out, kill the dragon, slay the whatever, save the whatever. But that desire has to be there. There are obstacles that you're going to throw in there. You love those players, but you're going to give them obstacles. That's the way the game goes. Conflict breeds wonder.
Conflict breeds drama.
That's
and
right.
Wonder, yes.
So when you're looking at that simple design lends yourself to everything moving forward.
And that's kind of where I think the best starting point with the plot. You know, if you're going to be writing a campaign, you want something big that's going to span several game sessions and stuff like that. You know, kind of like going back to the whole Song of Fire and Ice George R. R. Martin thing is like, you know, you're not going to start by saying there's a bunch of, you know, this going on and there's just political intrigue and there's these backstabbing over here and this betrayal over. No, you don't do that. You start with either the heroes want something, there is an obstacle or a villain standing in their way from getting it. Or the villain wants something and the heroes have to stand in their way from them getting it.
Correct.
Or period. After that, it's all just plot twists. After that, it is all just plot twists.
I mean, realistically, there's a goal. There's a reason for the goal. And then there's an antagonistic theme of either society, interpersonal, or internal. Okay. And that's it. And then that creates scenes. That creates conflict scenes that lead from one to the next, to the next, to the next. So you're always wanting to make sure that you have that base code down, that the characters or the villain yearns for something to happen because of a reason. It has to make sense. And then there are obstacles. That's it. You follow that formula and your stories will roll. Whatever it may be, you know? I mean, it's funny to say it, but you can do social, you know, plots that way. You can do fighting plots that way. It doesn't matter. As long as you have those elements, you are going to do just fine.
All right, so story structure.
Oh, boy.
Okay, now here's where we start getting into, like, shop talk and, like, really deep stuff.
Yeah, because, all right, I'm assuming that those of you who've done story writing before think about it in the act structure, the typical Sid Field paradigm, which is the 3-act structure: the rise, the mid, the fall. Okay, and it's, you know, 30% of your story is Act 1, where you have the build. Then you have your conflict in the middle, which is 50% of your story, and then you have the resolution, which is the last 20% of your story. You know, that wraps up all the endings. That is the standard writing style that literally everybody used. Dan Harmon turned that on its head because it doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't help the writer with that whole freaking midsection. Like, so many people have a great beginning, and many people have a wonderful close. But if you get to that middle section, you're kind of off figuring out what you're going to do. And for some people, it comes natural, but literally for most writers, it's confusing as hell. Like, yes, my players have a conflict. They need to find the chalice because it will save, the prince's son who is dying of this disease. Great. That's what they're yearning for. The conflict is that the villain wants has the chalice and has always had the chalice. Great. Second act.
It's what? Just go fight the villain because we're supposed to have conflict in the second act, but that's supposed to be half of my story. How do I make
exactly
go punch the guy half of my story?
Yeah, exactly. Resolution, we get the chalice and come home.
Right.
Great. That's fantastic.
Right.
What kind of growth is in there?
I mean, it sounds like a great plot for a one shot, but not for a campaign.
Exactly.
So where do you go from there? And that's kind of where Dan Harmon's model comes in. Is it kind of explains and fills in a lot of the steps in the middle.
Yeah.
Where you've got complications to that quest and where growth in your main character or characters takes place.
And Sarah brought up when we started into this, and I kind of gave her all this data and then blew her mind, said, like, we're not writing a story on rails.
Yeah, I said this is great if you're writing a book or a screenplay. I said, but this doesn't apply because it always kind of refers to, like, the hero.
Right.
Well, look, I've got 6 people at my table. I don't know about you.
Right.
And they're all the hero, and they're all on different journeys, technically. I mean, they're part of the same party, but they've all got different motivations, different measures of success.
Right. But the whole, the story mentality still follows. And your plot is a story that you're guiding the players through by putting them through scenes and conflict. So when you look at something like that and you want to have something that has meaning and flow, the circle helps you as you're working on the story. Yeah, you know the beginning and the end, pretty much. I mean, again, your players can go whatever direction they want, but you still are guiding them through the story by giving them these conflict points. And we promise we will put a good image of this circle up, this Dan Harmon circle. But effectively, the way that it works is it starts at the top of the circle with your players basically being established. You're building who they are. They then have a need. And that need isn't something that's right. There's something shifted in that need, which then has them go handle it. The need is the chalice. The chalice, they don't have it. So they need to go get it because it's going to save the son of the prince, right? So now they have to cross the threshold and go get it from the villain. Now, granted, they're heroes. They're having to go steal something. So there's something already off with that. Why does he have it that nobody else has it?
Well, maybe they're not stealing it. Maybe they're bargaining for it. Maybe they're
They
purchasing
don't know yet.
Who
They
knows?
got to go get it.
But that's part of the complication.
Right. So then they start searching. And maybe they find, and this is where you say, okay, well, maybe in the finding of it, they find out that really that chalice doesn't belong to the king. And that it doesn't actually belong to the people. It does belong to this guy who's had it. It's been his. He's had it because it's his family's resurrection chalice or whatever. So now they have to find that, which it is, get to it, and maybe steal it at that point, deal with the take. Now, the take is always the hardest part because the take involves the hardest point of the conflict and often has a problem that creates the return. The take is maybe someone is lost in that. Maybe in the take you discover that to get the chalice, a life must be taken. The whole Guardians moment there where there was like, okay, you want the soul stone. Guess what? There's a turn. And so that return brings your players back to what they need to do. And they realize coming back, there's a cost. Now there's a cost before they can end that story arc and bring it in. So the changes is, do we save the prince at the cost of one of us or at the cost of somebody, and they have to deal with that loss and bringing themselves back to who they were, and that is a story circle. Now we've just created this ultimate story, but we're not forcing the players through it. At any point in that circle, things could change. There could be an alteration. There could be something that they do that changes it. But by looking at the circle and moving through it and understanding all of those moments that as you step through, you're helping yourself become part of the storytelling. You're not just letting willy-nilly moments occur now, and not have a story. You're not just walking them from room to room through a dungeon.
Now, the important thing here too is that rather than just having conflict, you're putting a challenge in front of them. You're not just saying get the chalice,
Right.
but you're putting a cost attached to it. And I think the cost is the important thing because what it does is it puts a choice in front of your players.
Yeah.
Okay. And when any character has a choice to make, you see character revealed.
Yes.
And so they will weigh the options of, no matter what that cost is. In our hypothetical example here, it's, you have to spend a life to acquire the chalice of some sort. Okay.
Right.
So now I guarantee at this moment in your game, the players are sitting around arguing whose life, what the value of a life is.
Right.
If it's worth it.
I mean, they're probably trying to figure out, well, how much life is a life? Like, do we have to go find a dragon and trick it? Do we go steal a soul? Something like that.
Is it a willing life, or can we just kill somebody?
Exactly.
Et cetera. I mean, and you're gonna have a philosophical discussion about the nature of life at your tabletop, and you're gonna see some character revealed.
Yeah.
You're gonna see some of your characters go, well, life is cheap, whatever. Let's just kill some dude.
Right.
Who will know the difference, and you'll have other people going, no, this is not right.
Yep.
Life is precious, et cetera, and you'll see a lot of those, and then possibly you're going to have some people make some tough decisions.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to challenge some character assumptions, and that's where a lot of your character growth happens.
Yeah. And again, this is just one simple arc where we're showing that circle, and we're hitting points along it to help guide the story. And that's a simple description that we just did.
Yep.
And you can use this methodology to help you move through. Now, granted, some of this stuff comes naturally to people because they've written stories before and they kind of know the flow. But for someone who's brand new, this is somewhat mind-blowing. But again, like showing this between myself and Sarah, and it blew my mind. I'm like, I do a lot of this stuff organically.
Yep.
I don't think about that I've done it. But even looking at this, it helped me remember, there are times when I've forgotten this. When I've just gone back to go beat up a bunch of orcs.
Yeah.
And it's boring. And nobody likes that because it's uninteresting. They'll try and find something interesting in it that you're burying, but realistically you're not.
Well, especially nowadays too, where we do have a pretty strong prevalence of gaming and social media and stuff like that. I mean, just searching Dungeons and Dragons on YouTube, you're going to get millions of videos there.
Totally.
And so it's very easy to get lost in the whole, what's a good dungeon design? What's a fun way to use a monster and stuff like that.
Right.
And sometimes we lose sight of why we're doing it.
Right.
And we're just focusing more on what are we doing.
Yeah, because it's window dressing.
Hey, it would be fun to fight a dragon. Well, that's great, Rob, but why are we fighting a dragon? What is this dragon doing here? What's, what am I gaining from fighting this dragon?
For those of you who know Skyrim as a game, it's an open world game. Imagine if in Skyrim there were no quests. There was nothing guiding you from point to point to point in a quest. You were literally those people talk. Yes, they tell you that there are wares to buy. Yes, you know that the king is the king, but literally he doesn't, he might say, yeah, my son is, it's like, you could ask him where's your son? Oh, my son's here. And that's it.
Fun.
I mean, you could go visit his son and find out that he's a jerk to somebody, but there's nothing that's helping through the story. What the quests do are they push you into that story circle. They start you on that path.
Someone has a need.
Right.
And something is stopping you from getting it.
That need.
Yep.
Exactly. It's that it is the basics of a story. And so even if you're currently running a dungeon heavy game where literally your adventurers are just that, they're spelunkers. They're going into crypts, they're stealing things, and you want to just add some flavor. You want to give them a bit of story. Try this. Try adding something. Try a simple story that's in there. Maybe maybe a sword that they pick up is a magical sword that is actually intelligent, and it wants to take care of a problem. Maybe the soul that's in it really wanted to murder somebody, so it has a need. It needs to do that, and the players obviously have an interest in that. Because they're like, wait, who is this guy? Oh, he was a horde leader. Oh, so he has a lot of gold? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so now the players know what they're going to get out of this.
I'm just immediately thinking the sort of Kaz.
There you go.
Who does it want to kill? Vecna. Oh, okay.
That's
so, nobody important.
Yeah, exactly. But then from that point forward, start the circle. Literally just keep it out and move through your campaign using the circle. Add little elements. Let them do the standard stuff. Even use the standard, goblin architecture of putting bad guys in rooms together. But add little story elements to finish off that story. Make it a little challenging. Work your way around the circle and see how it changes your game. If you are an existing storyteller and you're already doing things, grab it. See if this stuff fits into what you're doing today, and see if you're maybe missing something in the steps. Maybe there's something that you skip over that you don't realize you're in. Try adding it back in. See how it moves you through your story.
Okay, so you've got your campaign structure. You've got your storytelling structure, I should say.
Yes.
Okay, so we all kind of know the hero's journey now. Like I said, we will be putting this up on the Discord if you want to look at it. We promise. So you can do this on the small scale or you can do this on the big scale. Okay, this works really whether you're doing a campaign over the course of several game sessions.
Totally.
Or if you're doing this more episodic as well. Because
serialized.
Yeah, serialized. Because you can do short little, it's basically a one-shot structure. You need something, you have conflict over it, and you have a resolution at the end, you know. So it's perfectly scalable about that. Now,
the barmaid has rats in her sewers, or rats in the cellar. She can't take care of them, but has money. Okay, the players want money. There are rats.
Go level 1 fighter. Take care of your dagger. Yes.
Exactly. Go take care. That is the simplest of story design, but it doesn't mean that it can't be interesting.
Perhaps those aren't rats. And there's your twist. And
or perhaps perhaps there's something else down there, and that's the reason why the rats are there.
Drawing the rats, right? Yes,
exactly. Maybe somebody else has let the rats in.
So all sorts of, like I said, it scales perfectly.
Yep.
Big scale, small scale, and then on your larger scale, you're going to have a lot of smaller scale conflicts along the way, because part of that journey is the journey to the thing. And then, the hardships you face along the way. And you may find that you've got smaller little circles inside your bigger campaign circle.
Exactly. So some things to keep in mind, some things to stay focused on, if you will, as you're working on the scale of either of them.
Because this is huge and it is daunting and it is easy to lose focus.
It is so easy to lose focus. I'm going to say one thing that stood out the most when I was watching the videos is, and it's not on our list here, and I wish I would have put it in there as a reminder because it hit me on the head, was put your butt in the chair.
Oh, yeah.
You are a storyteller. To tell a proper story, you need to sit down and write it. You need to be committed to it, okay? But you don't need to be committed to what you're writing. Nothing is perfect. You want to, if this episode sucks, scrap it. Retcon it completely. Make it a dream. Do something. Get rid of it. But don't stop. Do another one.
Every story is a failure, but the writer is the one who is not stopped by failure, and that makes them fearless.
I love that quote. I love that quote. When I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that is so true. So when you keep writing for your players, regardless of how crappy you think it is, they don't. They're engaged. They're there with you. Writing is rewriting. That is constantly being told. Nothing is ever the final.
And I think we talked about this in a previous episode when we were talking about just gaming styles and stuff like that. I don't remember where in the discussion it was, but we talked about our post-game breakdown.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally.
And asking where a crucial part of that is not only saying, okay, what was your favorite thing tonight? Let's have you give a moment to just kind of fangirl at me and just say, what you really loved, but also tell me what you didn't like tonight so that next time I can make that better for you.
Right.
You know, if you thought there was too much talking in this this game session, you know, you want more combat, then hey, when I sit down to write the next game session, I maybe throw an extra or a tougher combat encounter in there.
Right.
Lend a little more time to that and stuff like that. It's always about revising.
Yep. And sometimes it's revising your style that you're telling the story, like you were just saying. Maybe sometimes it's revising your boundaries at the table.
Yep.
You know, maybe people are having too much table chatter. And in that, not only is it a problem maybe for the players, but also that you weren't prepared, that you weren't engaging them. You weren't keeping them engaged in the story. And that can definitely be an issue as well. Maybe you were only engaging one or two players at the table with what you were doing. You know, those are all storytelling revisions that you have to work on, and those are definitely hard things to do as well.
But there's also story revisions as well. You can take place. You know, people are like, I mean, I think some feedback I've given you before in previous game sessions.
Oh yeah,
is I'm lost. I legit don't know what's going on in your plot right now. Like I know we fought some goblins today, and I know we got some mirrors.
Yep.
And those mirrors really spooked everyone else at the table, but I have no clue why that was even significant, and so I'm just kind of here swinging at goblins.
Funny enough, that's one of the things that kind of got me when I was looking at this, and they were things that I did poorly in the past, and that was they were a reveal to me as the storyteller, but they were not a reveal to the players.
Right.
I wasn't giving the information. And the thing is you don't have to reveal the whole history behind something, but it still has to have meaning for why it's there.
Sure.
I mean, it's funny that that, you know, when you're looking into a story and you have these people who are reading deeply into movies and things like, oh, well, in this scene in the movie, there was a lily in the back corner, and that meant it was Easter. What?
Okay.
So
but
this
how many
this
people
scene is
pick
about
that up, though,
it's a scene about rebirth, and I'm like, okay. But on the other hand, if it is a theme and you're using that as a theme, like there's snow on the ground, and now there's, you know, you're hearing people singing in the background of moving around, and now you know, when you come into a room, there's a lit tree. Oh, okay, so it's freaking Christmas. I know that's going to be a Chekhov gun moment. Like there's a reason why it's Christmas, and maybe that's the theme that's being pushed in the background, but it's not revealing unless you use it.
What we were kind of jokingly referring to as Chekhov's plot point.
Correct.
For those of you not familiar with the term Chekhov's gun, it was the theory that if you show a gun in the first act, someone must be shot by it by the third act.
Correct.
So in other words, don't put extraneous stuff into your plot if you're not going to use it.
Don't high detail a moment and then never use it.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, there are fantastic cinematographers and directors who use this in movies. You know, it's like yours says replica and mine says Desert Eagle .50. You know, that gun is going to go off at some point.
Yep.
So those kind of things are happening, but that also goes with anything else. If you've got a character who is dying or an NPC who is dying from a disease or something for 3 episodes, don't just have them have a miraculous, you know, cure in the end that comes out of exposition. You know, that you lose trust. Your players lose trust with you. Like, why were we doing anything about this?
Right. And that's the big thing. Your story needs to be driven by your heroes. Your heroes are the focal point of the story. So if you have miraculous Deus Ex Machina happening on or off camera, honestly, it robs the players of the experience.
Yep.
They want to feel like, you know, like the heroes at the end of the day. They want to feel like the ones who have the power, who resolve things of their wit and their steel and their brawn. And if you're just going to have an NPC swoop in or a magical cure
or a bullet come kill a character.
Yeah, they're just
like, oh, we did all this for the king, or we did all this for this lordship, and great, and then the window breaks and the character gets shot in the head and killed, and you're like, uh-oh. Like, that's kind of a loss. That's silly. That's a terrible way to remove someone from the plot when it's not something that you're aware of.
right.
Like, on the other hand, if they had let off a villain 3 scenes earlier who's a known assassin, and because, you know, they were being righteous or whatever, they saw him get away, sure, that could make a plot point for the next act. You know, that, yeah, he got the comeuppance on them. in that kind of situation. But
he better damn well be your main villain.
Exactly.
Then and there.
Yep.
Yeah.
You've just set a new Chekhov's gun that you have to do something with, All
right, you got another quote written down here that I absolutely love.
Do it.
I love it because I do this.
Okay.
Scene is vivid and intimate. Summary is distant but efficient. Scene is where the writer engages the imagination and creativity of the writer. Everything important should happen in scene.
Correct.
Do not just gloss over important stuff in an overarching summary. Oh, yeah, this happened and that happened and that happened.
Yeah, none of that. All that should literally be history. It should not have anything to do with the plot other than setting. If you're when you're talking about story, especially in role play, when characters are moving from moment to moment, scene to scene. For instance, they just finished a fight out in the woods. They're tired. There's no necessary reason for you to explain them going to bed, getting up the next morning, having each of the players go through high detail of what they're doing to get to the city if literally there is no plot to be revealed. If there's nothing being revealed or nothing intimate going to happen between you and your players, then step away from it. Do it in a summary. Make it distant, make it just happen, and move on. And let the next scene drive the next moment. But at the same time, don't have a scene feel useless. Don't just do a fight to do a fight.
This is why I don't do random encounters in D&D. Because I think, you were jumped by wolves.
Yeah.
Why? Are we going to be killed by these wolves?
Right.
Are you really going to kill us with wolves when we're on this big heroic journey? No,
Right.
I'm not. I'm not, and we both know it.
I think I'm going to use the word cop-out, but I will say this. There are times when a storyteller is tired, who just doesn't have it in them, but all the players are there.
Sure.
And sometimes you just need to have a moment of pause, and a random encounter can give you that moment of pause, but I still think it's cheap to the players.
Oh, it is.
It's a bit of popcorn for them to sit in. It's a fart joke. It's something to fill the space, and you can do better.
Right.
As a writer, as a storyteller, you can do better.
Now it's worth noting. This is how I open every single game for you guys.
Yep.
So this is actually something. One of those like oh hey, I'm already doing this.
Yes. Yep.
Is because we play once a month. And so I want to be able to recap the entire last game session for them just in summary.
Yeah.
It's usually like 3 paragraphs long. Hits all the major points. I don't gild the lily. I always tell you the truth in the summaries.
Yep.
So that you come away with facts, not implications.
Right. And it's not riddly facts. It's straight up facts.
It's straight up facts. You found this, and discovered that the Minister of Finance was doing this.
Right.
And then I start a little bit of music and cut immediately to Fridas, 4th day of midyear, 3rd era, 4:15. The boy sprints into the wilderness, and Rhaegar follows. Metal plates clank against one another only his magical boots, blah, 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 blah.
Right. And that's literally the last thing we had in the previous session, because we were still in action. And Sarah was like, we need to have a scene follow this up. And we're all like, we need to have a scene follow this up.
We have a hard stop at 8 p.m. And I think it had gone to like 8:15 already. And we were like, okay, we just needed to finish up the combat, but trust me, we will pick up literally right at this exact moment next game. And so I roll straight from summary into scene to bring it from broad overview down into the intimate level of, okay, so Rhaegar is chasing this kid through the field. And
we went from
go.
there.
And go.
Yeah.
Here's the setting for you. The kid is running, and it goes on to describe how he kind of loses hope and just kind of loses steam. And Rhaegar, is big and athletic, so he catches up to him and is like assuring him the whole time, "We're not going to hurt you. We're not going to hurt."
Yep.
But that puts everybody in the mindset of like, "Oh, that's right. This is what was going on.
Right.
This is an intense scene because you've narrated it as such. And now, okay, we're ready to go."
And then that scene progressed. We did some interrogations. We did some other stuff. We had some inter-party stuff that happened. And then as that closed, without much fanfare or anything, we closed that scene, and you put us on the path to the next town.
Yep.
And we just, as far as everybody was concerned, we were just there.
Yep. It was a quiet 2 hours travel later, and you
Boom.
begin to see the town crest over the next hill.
Right. And that right there is exactly what summary is supposed to do. It's supposed to move you from scene to scene.
Yep.
So that you can have those moments and have an impact, have reveals occur in the scenes. And keep that in mind. Make things meaningful. Make your moments meaningful. So that your sessions feel full. I'll use that term.
Yeah,
full.
I was going to say productive, but full.
Yeah.
Full is good. Full is good.
Yeah. When we're talking about focus, one of the things that we both came up with is kind of thematic or emotion. And I think this is something that is important on an over arc. And I think it can sometimes get lost, is that if you're telling a story, whether it's a one-shot or it's a whole campaign, try and stick with an emotion as you're moving through it. Don't change that emotion midstream unless there's an active change occurring. You see this in movies where you have you have hope, you have dread, you have concern, you have anxiety, you then have revelation, and then sometimes that's followed back up by depression because loss occurred, and these are normal things, but it follows the scene, the lighting, the movement, the character tone, or the character's tone, the way things move. You're not just going to shift things without there being a reason in the story for them to shift. The rain is cold and it's daunting, and the ground is muddy, and there are constant puddles that range from a couple, just barely a centimeter of water to as much as a rut full that you accidentally clobber into because of the darkness and the mist that are crossing the lands. You feel the misery of that moment.
This is actually something that H.P. Lovecraft, as utterly problematic as that man was, I feel like he did very well in his writing, which was, he trying to describe it, because the thing that I loved that he did was describe things as indescribable. First off, and because he was trying to throw you off. And he created through his descriptions created a very he was very good at just creating dread by just saying it was indescribably horrible, and it was not quite like a mole or an ant or a rotting human corpse or a bat, but something indescribably in between. Right. And you're like, how do you even mash together a mole, a bat, an ant, and a rotting corpse? But that's what your brain is doing.
Your creativity starts pulling it together.
Even in the setting of scenes, he would be like, the horrible trees lurked over the horrible trees, Mr. Lovecraft. Horrible, but
this is terrible creative writing.
But there they were.
Yeah.
It was never a bright, sunshiny day in his world. It was always dreadful and oppressive, and there was never a scent. There was a stench.
Yeah.
But damned if it didn't create the mood.
Yeah, the old, the old serialized detective stories had a sound and a feel and a darkness that when they became visual, when they became movies, you already knew how it had to look. And if it didn't look that way, it felt weird.
Oh, it did. Yeah.
You expected the trench coat, smoke, cigarette lit, dark shadows, hard lines, because that's how it was described. That's how things felt as you stepped through them. And then moving from cinema now back to storytelling in the theater of the mind, we do that. We're forcing your brain back to those images and grabbing bits and pieces. People will see it differently, but the tone sets the moment so that everybody's on that same page.
Absolutely.
Sometimes that has to be directed to your player's point of view as well.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, because part of that is putting your players into the scene and addressing them directly. For instance, for those of you who are familiar with the Elder Scrolls, I have a Nord in my group.
Yep.
And so temperature is not really something, or I should say cold temperature is not something that bothers them, because they come from a place that snows, I would probably say 10 out of the 12 months of the year, if not all 12.
Right.
And so when I'm describing temperatures, I'm very keen to say the hot temperature is not bothering the Khajiit much.
Yeah.
The rest of you are sweating bullets. And Rhaegar, you are miserable.
Yeah.
You are utterly miserable because it is above 70.
Yeah.
But, when they got down in a dungeon and it was cool and it was, out of the sunlight, everybody else was kind of shivering a little bit. And I was like, this is the first time you've been comfortable in months.
There's barely any humidity. It's dry and cold, and your skin, the rest of your skin is cracking. Meanwhile, Rhaegar is sitting there going, why are we making a fire?
Right.
Like, it's nice.
But putting them and making them what that does, it just makes them part of the scene. It just kind of personalizes things for them. And don't be afraid to tell whole chunks of your story like that.
Yeah.
Especially if you're exploring a person's, personal backstory or something like that. If this is a plot arc that directly deals with Rhaegar or Thalion or whoever, at your table, get intimate with them.
Yeah.
Tell them things from their character's perspective.
Yeah.
Allow everybody else to witness the story through their eyes for a little bit.
And another thing is use those backgrounds. If your player is not necessarily good at role playing or knows how to play their character, at least help them with their perspective. I mean, in two different cases, let's say you've got a group of relatively rich kids, effectively, who are playing heroes, and they're going to do some things and become adventurers. Their perspective on meeting a person in an alley to get information is going to be shady and grim and disgusting. Whereas if you've got seasoned fighters and maybe a rogue who's been in the shadows themselves, when they come to that situation, they're looking at it as an equal, another professional, someone who's using the shadows to their guide, and it's a different footing. You're gauging, are they dangerous? Have they led us into an ambush? So the perspective change there is different based upon who's viewing it. And it's not you as the storyteller to force that perspective as your own perspective, but reminding yourself that these players, these characters that these players are in, all have a different perspective. So sometimes it's good to grab one of the players and focus on their perspective. And then when another player asks a question, shift your mind into that player's mind for a second. Think of how they might perceive this and work from that perspective. Give them a different description, maybe.
All right, I think we're getting to the point where I think we need to grab some questions.
Yeah, I think we've hit the base level. I think we're good, so that we have some grounding to work from
like
at this point.
We weren't going to unpack all of this in one episode. This is going to be several episodes, but this is, I think, the good tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah.
Okay. So I do want to just finish the discussion by saying this.
Yep.
Once again, Rome was not built in a day.
Yeah.
Song of Fire and Ice, Game of Thrones was not written overnight.
Nope.
Okay. Somebody had an idea. They had a hero and a conflict and a villain and a desire. They laid that down, and then they just started asking why, and they just started layering things on top of it.
Yep. Let the plot drive it.
Start
simple. Let the plot drive it. Sometimes let your players drive it. They find something, you're like, ooh, that's good. Let me write that down.
They'll ask why for you, and when you come up with that answer, that's another plot twist for you.
Discover. Don't expose it to them.
All right, question time.
Yay!
I'm excited.
All right, do we want to move down, or do you want to start with that first one?
You tell me where you want to start.
Let's start that one last, because I almost want to put that one maybe into an episode discussion as well, but we can tap it.
Okay.
We can start. So let's start with Overwatch. Building campaigns. As a GM, when putting together a new campaign from scratch, what is your jump off point for getting started? He's got a secondary question. We'll answer that one in a minute. For me, it varies. My jump point might be a theme that I hear or a setting that gives me an idea. Sometimes a song will give me an idea, and that might be my jump point, but that is far from where I end up. Like, I will start writing based upon the weirdest reasons. But when it comes down to actually getting players to the table, I will have an idea of the arc. Just an idea, because I don't necessarily know where they're going to fit into that unless I force them into the arc. And I create a very directed campaign. But most of the time for my jump points, my jump point for getting started is my interest, my intrigue, my creativity.
I don't know. I guess I'm kind of misunderstanding what jump point, what we're talking about here.
From a new campaign from scratch, like when you
Just
started
talking about jump point for writing or jump
Yeah.
point for starting session 1?
I would say from writing.
From writing, yeah, I think what I've said multiple times where, come up with a conflict. Usually I'll come up with a fun motivation for a villain or a fun MacGuffin that might be interesting to fight over, that would have an interesting twist to it,
Yeah.
Hey, wouldn't it be funny if there was this magic sword, but really it was
exactly.
And then you cook up a villain who might want that magic sword or something like that, and then you give the heroes a reason to go from that. Usually it's I start with conflict, I think.
Okay.
And then
It makes it easy.
I look for reasons to start the conflict.
Sounds perfect.
Or I start with the villain and I look for reasons and I think of what crap would that villain start.
Fair. Favorite table snack?
Nachos, always nachos. And sour gummy snacks.
You do love your sour gummy snacks. I was almost going to bring you some today.
No.
Yeah, I was almost going to bring you some because Vicky got me some.
Oh, my tongue would not have been able to take it. Like I put so much Frank's Red Hot on
I noticed.
on my
I would have warned you beforehand so that you had some stuff coming, then you would have changed what you did for dinner. Favorite table snack? Honestly, I really don't have necessarily a favorite table snack that I would just say right off the bat that I would eat. It varies. Sometimes I want salty, sometimes I want something sugary, but it's rare that I want something sugary. But I think if there's Doritos on the table, I will eat them. So I'm going to say Doritos. Traditionally Cool Ranch, but I'll eat any Dorito.
Fair enough. Good question though.
Good question. All right.
So Vedran is asking, building a campaign, when is the setting ready by your standards?
Never.
Sketched on a napkin, map and some notes, 4-volume Time Life book series?
Never.
Never.
It's
I'm
never
having
ready.
a rolling anxiety attack about it constantly.
Yep. The setting will never be perfect. Make the story.
Yeah.
And the setting will come.
Yeah.
I mean, get it based under the world so that you understand it. But settings get so out of hand. They get so out of hand because you could start writing and then you just don't stop writing about the setting. It has nothing to do with the story. It doesn't drive the story in any way.
Yeah.
It can definitely be great window dressing and you have to explain things, but there's no reason why you can't be explaining those things. You can't start at a 5,000-foot view of the world is a giant disc on the back of a turtle.
It's turtles
Boom.
all the way down, man.
That's right. It's at the bottom. It's more turtles. But you don't have to explain more than that until they decide to look over the edge and say, "Is it a male or is it a female?"
Right.
Like, what's the important part? You don't know. Answer it later. Keep going.
Exactly.
Is that the story? No. The story is about a mage who's got a spell stuck in his freaking head.
I mean, there are even some game games systems that encourage you not to fill in the blanks. Like Dungeon World was very explicit about that.
Yeah.
They're like, rule number 1: leave gaps in your map.
Mm-hmm.
Because we'll discover those as we go.
Yep.
7C
has got great setting points, but they leave so many giant gaps. They don't explain. History is very vague in some places. They left giant holes in other areas, but motivations, individuals were all pretty well flushed out. So you had that room to explain. Like there's a whole veil in there that you can step into, and when you get there, literally they left a giant hole there. Like there are monsters there that lurk in those shadows between the veil and reality. That's it. That's what they said.
There are monsters.
There's
there.
monsters. Dark monsters.
What kind?
There are warriors who fight there, and if you become one of those warriors, the veil, you know the challenges of the veil, and you're like, great. I guess I'll have to work on that. So
the short answer is never.
Yeah, never.
Ready.
Just keep going.
Just roll with it. Just roll with it and fill in the blanks as you go.
All right. Technolich. How important is theme to your campaign? By theme, I mean literary sense, overarching emotional response, or commentary on the nature of life. Should tabletop RPGs be more adventure plot focused? Oh, wow. Is this a whole nother question? I think it is. Okay, let's start with that first one. How important is theme to your campaign? To the campaign, I would say it is important, but is not as important as the story itself. I think theme directs the players to a feeling that how their character should be feeling as they move through it.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that I don't quantify, that I never think about.
Yeah.
I would dare say I think a lot of storytellers are like that. Where the thing back in my game, my current campaign and stuff like that, where I definitely have a theme.
And sometimes it changes.
I mean,
there's an overall theme I'm getting.
So the thing about theme is
life sucks, get a helmet. That's kind of what I'm getting from it.
Well, yeah, it's more about hopelessness and mercy.
Yeah, right.
And loss of control and a regaining of control. But what I would say is it's kind of like asking which is more important, dinner or the table it's sitting on. Like, you might say the table isn't important, but try serving dinner without a table.
And I'm gonna blow your mind. It's the fact that you're having dinner.
All right, that does blow my mind, but that's a whole other discussion.
So that's where I'm saying is that never forget why you're there.
Yeah. I mean, but if you want, it's going to be the difference between a story and a good story, I think.
I agree. You can say somebody's having dinner and they're having pizza, but it's a different thing to say you're having pizza with your family at a dinner table, or we're all sitting in the living room around a game board, shoving the pizza in without thinking about it while rolling dice. Those are two different themes.
Right.
With very different feelings. It's still dinner.
Yes,
so
you're right.
That's the thing that I'm getting at there. Second part of this. Should tabletop RPGs be more adventure plot focused, as in paying attention to the series of events, or a larger statement theme?
No, I don't think theme should never overtake plot.
Nope.
But I think plot should be informed by theme.
Correct. Your series of events tells the story. That's what the drive is. Like,
right.
don't just let the theme suddenly take over the reason for the plot.
Right.
You're losing focus.
But when you're like, what plot points should I put them through? Let your theme inform that decision. Well, I mean, no. Think about it. Like, if you're,
I'm bending my mind.
If your theme is loss, or something like that, okay,
right.
Experiencing loss, like okay. For instance, I thought about this earlier, and I'm gonna have to go real quick because we're kind of running short on time here. One of my favorite games in the world is Silent Hill 2. Okay. Now that has a very strong theme-driven plot. A lot of it is not very spelled out for you at all. Great environmental storytelling, but basically there's this underpinning theme of, but kind of going on. And I don't really know how to quantify that, but kind of loneliness and loss, but self-inflicted wound sort of thing. Basically every main character in that game is in some way a murderer. They have all taken a life, and they've all done so in what might be considered a justifiable way, maybe, under certain circumstances. And a lot of the plot is exploring the motivations behind what they did there. And so a lot of that theme is just, okay, that's great, but...
I see where you're going with this.
I
still think that your plot design is your focus, but the theme helps guide you step to step. So I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay.
I know I have my own thoughts on this, but I want to get yours. What are some good ways to incorporate theme without hitting the players over the head? It's exposition.
Yeah.
It's feeling. It's where they're at. It's the rain. It's the beautiful sunny day. It's the sun breaking the horizon.
It's the terrible, oppressive trees casting long, ominous shadows.
Correct. Or it's the unicorn showing up on the hillside, demanding that you recognize it.
Yep.
Those are things that help. It's the lilies. It's the little things that remind your players what's going on in the background of the story that brings the theme back into place. It's the crying mother, after the fight, and you realize that the fireball that went off just blew up a house full of kids, We're not going to hit this question, but it's going to be part of our next discussion, technology. So here's the question. Animals, henchmen, followers, droids, what are some good ways to handle them without becoming time or an energy suck on the game? we both had a discussion about this, and it dawned on us that this is an element that needs to be discussed, but not heavily. But I think it's longer than a minute.
Yeah, longer than a minute. But I think your short answer. You want to give a short answer?
Sure, go for it.
The short answer is they're items.
Yes.
They're items that have a use. They should never be heroes. They should never have a direct impact on your plot. If your person has hired a mage to be an apprentice to them, they should be a research assistant that gives them an advantage on research rolls, or maybe digs up a plot point or two if directly asked to search libraries. And I want these scrolls scribed. Okay, great. So you get to also go shopping and have your scrolls scribed because you have an assistant doing it for you.
Yep. That's it.
That's
the simple of it.
Yep.
So we'll get more into that later. So next week's topic, we're going to continue by talking about developing a one-shot or the milk run.
Right.
And getting you that opening to try and work with. So, as Kate is telling us, we're wrapping up today. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave or on Instagram at @ST_conclave. Our Discord is in the Twitter, so please click on that link to join us and add your own comments.
It's also in the episode information notes if you've got access to that as well.
Yes.
We do want to thank our Patreon members, all of you who support us, especially Knox in a Box. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Gooey Frog. Our outro music is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Mid-Air Machine. You can find tracks like this and so much more on freemusicarchive.org.
You can come record for yourself here at Podcast Detroit, at podcastdetroit.com, or Twitter at Podcast Detroit. Our engineer is Kate, and there are open free nights when you can do it here, so check out their site and you can come record your own stuff.
Heck yeah.
But most of all, we'd like to thank our friends and our family. Sean and Vicky, thank you so much for letting us do this, and our Patreon members for helping support us in this so that we can keep doing these wonderful shows.
And each and every one of our listeners. We love you. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.